Hey there, it's Lara here. I am back. It is Wednesday, September 16th, 2020, and I'm here this week to talk to you mostly about the new moon in Virgo that's coming up tomorrow on the 17th, Thursday the 17th at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, so you can adjust for your time zone at 25 degrees of the mutable earth sign of Virgo. So that's what we're going to talk about mostly today, and how, that's going to play out for all of us collectively, but how it's impacting each of us specifically as well. So I have a lot to say about this. But before I get there, I just want to let you in on a couple of things. We also have the fall equinox happening on Tuesday, the 22nd of September. And ideally, I would talk to you about that in next week's video. I may not be here. I have some dental surgery tomorrow. And depending on how that goes and how long the recovery is, I may or may not be ready for talking on camera. So, but in either case, I will definitely write about it. So I'll write about it on Facebook. And possibly Instagram as well. But you can always connect with me on those platforms, and the link to both of those is below. So yeah, may or may not be here next week. But the new moon is happening in Virgo, like I said. The moon is currently in Virgo as I'm recording this. So she's already made her way into Virgo, but the new moon is at the later degrees of Virgo. So she hasn't quite reached there just yet. So in the meantime, here we are in what we call the dark moon phase, right? And I posted about this yesterday again on Instagram and Facebook, but at this particular time in the moon cycle, when the moon is waning and she is in her darkest phase, we can't see her in the sky because she's getting ready to be sort of born again, right? Renewed at the new moon. And so during the dark moon, it's not really the optimal time to be beginning new things. If you start something brand new in the dark moon phase, the chances of it getting off the ground are not as great as if you wait until the new moon, particularly if you wait until the moon becomes visible, which is usually, not at the exact moment of the new moon, but a little bit after that. So within a day or two after the new moon actually happens. So in this case, that would be, sort of later on Thursday or even on Friday would be a good time if you were going to launch something, set some intentions, that sort of thing, right? For the new moon. And we'll talk about which shape, those intentions might take on. So, but we do have the equinox coming, like I said, on the 22nd, and that just briefly here, it's this point in the year in the northern hemisphere. It's the fall or autumnal equinox, and it's associated with the holy day or holiday on the pagan wheel of the year, the witch's wheel of the year of Mabon. Right? And then if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're moving into spring. So it's the spring equinox there, which is associated with Ostera on the wheel of the year, right? The Celtic wheel. It has many names, but so essentially this is a balance point. It's a time where we have equal parts light and dark, equal parts day and night. And it's a time for us to assess the balance in our own lives, among other things, but just to put it succinctly. So more on that later on. But right now, let's dive into the moon in Virgo. The moon's in Virgo today, as I mentioned, in her dark moon phase. And then we'll have that new moon tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern time on the 17th. And then she'll move into Libra later on Thursday, and then into Scorpio on Friday, and Sagittarius on Monday. So, that's where she's at. And of course, I try to mention this, remember to mention this every week in case you're new here, and welcome if you're new here. I appreciate it. But I do have over on my website a free guide to working with the moon. So if you're curious about that, you can click the link below and go check it out and get it for yourself. So the moon is happening on it's happening in Virgo, obviously, but on this axis of Pisces Virgo, right? And so Neptune will be over in Pisces, almost, it's in a loose opposition to the new moon within about 5-ish degrees. So close enough to have an impact, definitely. Especially when we're talking about one of the outer planets, right? The slower moving planets like Neptune. So there is this opposition between Pisces and Virgo. And I mentioned to you before that opposite signs, they want the same thing, ultimately. But they go about getting it in different ways. So in the case of Virgo and Pisces, right? Virgo and Pisces both really want wholeness, oneness, union, and purity in a sense, right? Virgo is most often associated with purity, but there is an element of that with Pisces as well. The thing is Pisces wants a connection with, a union with the whole, with the universe, with a higher power, with that which we cannot really see or put our finger on, right? Pisces is this very spiritual, mystical energy, and Pisces also, like another word I would say is Pisces wants union with the soul, whereas Virgo also wants union and wholeness, but that's more on a more kind of material, earthly, right? Virgo is an earth sign, Pisces is a water sign. It's about union with the self. The symbol for Virgo is the Virgin, and so we have this skewed perception of what that means in modern times. And I've spoken about this before as well, but to remind you, if you've never heard me say this before, ultimately, what that word meant originally, virgin, was a person whole unto themselves, right? And so that, like, they didn't need somebody to complete them. And so that's really the essence of Virgo energy. And so Virgo strives for that wholeness unto itself, that unity within the self, that union with earth and nature, that sort of thing, and the purification of those things. So you see what I'm talking about here. There's an element of, or there's a thread of the same kind of thing that runs across that axis of Pisces and Virgo, which, sometimes is referred to as the axis of order, Virgo, and chaos, Pisces, right? I often refer to it as the axis of practical magic, practical being the Virgo end of things and magic being the Pisces end, right? Virgo and Pisces are also very much about service to the material, sort of earthly, practical realm, which is Virgo, and service to the spiritual realm, which is Pisces. And so there is also a connection to health here in terms of, physical health, which Virgo is very much connected to, and our more sort of spiritual, mental health, which Pisces is connected to. And, these things, they all are very connected. So you can see how those work together to balance, right? Ultimately, that's what we're striving. Ultimately, we need both. We need both ends of the spectrum. Our feet firmly planted on the ground and our head in the clouds, kind of thing. Faith, which is very much Pisces and Neptune, but faith backed by practical action, right? Which is Virgo. And that's how we make our dreams a reality, really. Dreams, Pisces, reality, right? Virgo. And it's really how we can best not only survive, but thrive in these sort of crazy times we're living in, right? Because if we sit back and just sort of trust that it's all going to work out, which is, sometimes that can be Pisces on the shadow side of things. We disconnect from reality. We escape into unhealthy, substances, or we just check out kind of thing. And so if we do that, or we refuse to see, reality such as it is, like if we just pretend that, the earthly realm is not something that we need to consider or concern ourselves with, or that, what's going on around us on the day-to-day, Virgo, is not our concern. If we try to escape that reality, then, we don't necessarily end up where we want to be ultimately. Or, like if we're all going around sort of thing with our, I think I used this analogy maybe even last week, but with our hands over our eyes and over our ears and our, that sort of thing, then, we are not really contributing to the world we want to live in and be a part of. So, but on the other end of the spectrum, if we're only concerning ourselves and hyper-focused, which Virgo can be, on the very mundane, practical kind of day-to-day tasks and checking off the ticky boxes, or we work ourselves to exhaustion, Virgo can be very connected to being a workaholic. We're trying to keep everything in order and under control, and, making sure all the tasks get done, and concerning ourselves with making things just so, then we lose sight of the bigger picture, and we may lose faith as well, right? And so there's that. So I want to show you the chart right now. I have so much more to say here, but I want to show you the chart, and then I'll carry on. Here we've got the chart for the new moon in Pisces. In Virgo, opposite Neptune in Pisces. There's Neptune at 19 degrees Pisces at the time of the full moon. The new moon, rather. And there's the sun and the moon together at 25 Virgo, right across the sky. So new moon, to remind you, is always when the sun and the moon meet up to birth something new. So it's when they're together in the sky. And then a full moon happens when the moon is across the sky from the sun. So, which is in 2 weeks' time, right? So we've got, they're the sun and the moon in Virgo, Neptune and Pisces across the sky that we've just been talking about. We also have some other really relevant things going on in relation to this new moon. Relevant aspects. So up here, of course, we've got Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Pallas Athena, all still in Capricorn. But Saturn is making an exact trine to this new moon at 25 degrees Capricorn, right? There is a trine, so a harmonious aspect, a harmonious, helpful conversation. Pluto and Jupiter are also in that trine to a slightly lesser degree. We also have Jupiter that has just recently, in the last few days, stationed direct after being retrograde. We will then have Saturn and Pluto both stationed retrograde within the next few weeks. So I'll, keep that in mind. And the other thing I want to mention to you here is we've got Mars, who's, stirring the pot over here in Aries. And Mars is in a conversation with this new moon called an inconjunct, which is a bit of a tricky one. And then we've got the South Node in Sagittarius, the North Node in Gemini down here, and this new moon is squaring the nodal axis, right? So that's what I want to show you. Hopefully I have time to address all these things, but I'm going to try. So I think I've probably said enough about the actual axis of Virgo and Pisces. There's more I could say, always. Let's address a couple of those other things. So first of all, the square. The square, this new moon is squaring the nodal axis, right? The north node in Sagittarius and the south node. The north node in Gemini and the south node in Sagittarius. So Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius are the 4 mutable signs, right? That's the mutable cross, we call it. And so this is giving us a real key to what's one of the things that we need to kind of consider about this new moon. This square to the nodes, which in evolutionary astrology is referred to as a skipped step. It's something that can trip us up on our path, our soul's path on towards our sort of destiny, which is north node, right? To put it simply. So with this new moon squaring the nodes, it's like it's kind of this hint that the answer to what ails us right now is adaptability, right? Mutability, the ability to change and shift and, to really shift our perspective and our actions and our reactions and our plans even in response to whatever's happening in the moment. So going with the tides of change right now is really essential. It's really essential. And if we can't do that, for whatever reason, we may end up getting swept up in the current kind of thing and lose ourselves or be caught off guard. If when we sort of realize that our resistance and in some cases our perhaps willful ignorance of the reality of things is not serving us after all. So, it's a kind of eyes wide open willingness to accept the changing currents and adapt accordingly, rather than trying to resist or fight what's, where life is trying to sort of direct our attention right now. And with that axis of Gemini and Sagittarius, right, there is this, again, those two signs are opposite each other, right? So they have something in common, but they kind of go about it in different ways. And it's like this need for a balance. And opposition is always a need for a balance of our sort of intuitive nature, our instinctual nature, that sense of knowing and wisdom, our convictions, which are all Sagittarian themes, truth, big T kind of thing. And balancing that with consideration of the facts and information and differing perspectives, which is very much Gemini, right? So that's really ultimately what's needed right now. And this Virgo new moon, I think, is challenging us. Squaring the nodes is asking us to assimilate. Both the Virgo is very much about assimilation, assimilating the knowing, right, Sagittarius, and the learning, Gemini. So, be willing to change your mind based on new information, but also trust your gut to know what's true. Trust your instinct, right? That inner sense of knowing. So that's the piece squaring the nodes. And then we've also got this trine, which is really, really a supportive aspect. A trine is a conversation between the planets that's trying to help us out, that's trying to guide us in the right direction, that's giving us a bit of a gift, if we're willing to receive it. And so with a trine to Saturn, and it's an exact trine because Saturn will be at 25 degrees at the time of this new moon, which the sun and the moon are at 25 Virgo, right? So, and Saturn is in Capricorn, which is an earth sign. the new moon is in Virgo, an earth sign, right? The earth signs trine each other. So they support each other. So we've got this trine, and like I said, there's a Pluto and Jupiter also trining the new moon, but that conversation's a bit weaker because Pluto's at 22 degrees, so a little bit off, and then Jupiter even further away at 17, right? And then Pallas Athena over there at 12 degrees, so a little bit further away still. But I think this is kind of, it's a key, particularly in the sense of, or in the case of Saturn, that whatever new thing we are trying to, or we intend to begin, whatever new beginning happens around the time of this new moon, it will require some determination and patience, which is very much Saturn. But that if we're willing to work with that, ultimately we can create something very, very practical and sustainable with Saturn and, with Capricorn energy and Virgo energy. And then we've also got this energy of transformation with Pluto there. So this new moon is supporting the transformation that wants to happen. Those two energies are in harmony, and also with Jupiter there to a lesser degree, trying to keep the faith, right? And have a sense of optimism, even, when things are rough, and have this sense of, we're getting somewhere. And, if we're just willing to sort of do the work and put one foot in front of the other, Virgo, then, we're looking towards a brighter future, right? So, some things to consider definitely here. Virgo is an expert problem solver and is very practical, very grounded, very self-sufficient, very intelligent. I have a visitor. One of my cats is in the room. She may come say hi, but she's looking out the window right now. So with that in mind, ask yourself some questions, some sort of Virgoan questions around this time. And so things like asking yourself, what is essential right now? What is really essential, right? Where am I willing to cut out what's not essential? And that can look like all different kinds of things. It can be in relation to our, the tasks we're doing on the day-to-day. It can be in relation to our communications. It can be in relation to, financial matters, relationships, all kinds of things, right? It sort of depends on where this new moon is sitting for you. And we're going to get to that shortly. So what's essential? And the advice is take what's working and leave the rest, at least for now. What are you devoted to? Virgo is very much about this sense of devotion. So what are you truly, truly committed and devoted to? And leave the rest, at least for now. Because you can't be truly devoted to 100 things all at the same time. Trust me. This is something I struggle with. I'm a Virgo rising too, so this big new moon for me. What in our lives on a very practical way needs to be decluttered and purified and cleansed and maybe brushed up on, or where do we need to pay some attention to the details, right? In our lives. That's very Virgo. How can I take practical, measured steps to really, towards what I ultimately want, my dreams, right? That Neptune and Pisces across the sky there. Take it in chunks. Virgo's about taking it in small chunks, right? And you can't do it all at once. So think about, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to manifest? Although that word I think is way overused these days, but you know what I mean. And whatever that is, whatever you want to make a reality, Virgo, then make a list and start checking it off like Virgo, but don't get bogged down in it, right? Don't get overwhelmed. One day at a time, one step in front of the other, one small micro action at a time is how we get there. And so, that's some advice from Virgo. Ultimately, as I said, this new moon, like all new moons, is about some sort of new beginning related to these Virgo themes, right? That we've been talking about. So it's a good time to devote yourself to something new in relation to the themes of the house that the new moon is happening in for you. And to do that in this Virgoan fashion of one step at a time, attention to detail, being practical, feet on the ground, being helpful. Virgo's very helpful and service oriented, being ethical, and maybe a little bit at times self-deprecating, not taking ourselves too seriously. Virgo actually gets a bad rap sometimes for being too serious, but Virgo is actually quite funny, quite self-deprecating, able to laugh at themselves. And so, that's something I think we could all do a little bit more of these days, right? Myself included. What else do I want to say to you? There's so much to say. Gosh. I guess, the shadow side of Virgo is what we would ultimately need to watch out for. And that would be things like overthinking, being overly critical of ourselves and of others, of, being bogged down in guilt that we're not doing enough, or we're not doing the right things, we're not doing it right. Ultimately ask, what would Virgo do? When Virgo is operating at its optimal capacity, what would Virgo do? Then trust your gut. Then trust the answer. Because here's one thing I haven't said to you yet. Virgo rules the gut. Every sign is related to certain parts of the body. And for Virgo, it's very much about the gut. So, and we know that our gut, right, is a way of tuning into and processing and assimilating information and stimulation from outside sources, kind of thing. So the other Mercury ruled sign, right? Virgo's ruled by Mercury, but the other Mercury ruled sign is Gemini, and Gemini does this taking in and assimilating of information very much sort of through the head, through the mind, whereas Virgo, it's more, there's an element of that, but it's also very much about that that gut intelligence, right? We know now through scientific research that the gut is like a second brain. And so that's, Virgo has this ability to take in information and know what's sort of true and false based on their gut responses. So set goals and intentions for the short term around the time of the new moon, meaning the short term, meaning, any sort of short term, smaller scale things that you're looking at over the next couple of weeks, right? That will come to culmination at the full moon in a couple of weeks, but also for the longer term. So for like the next 6 months, right? Because in 6 months from now, there will be the full moon in Virgo. So those longer term intentions that we set and the plans that we put in play now, we can look for them or put an eye on having them sort of coming to fruit and fruition, culmination, in about 6 months' time when we have the full moon in Virgo. So last thing I'll say before I dive into each of the signs is those that have sun, moon, rising sign, or planets, significant energy going on in their chart around the 25-degree mark of Virgo in particular, but also the other mutable signs of Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius, are very much likely to experience this more personally, right? This new moon, this new fresh start in some way. So anybody say between, like when you have things between, say, 25 to 30 degrees, that's a fairly, 5 degrees on either side of the new moon, of those mutable signs. But keeping in mind that we also have the cardinal signs being hit, endlessly triggered, right? So Aries, Mars is in Aries right now, squaring the energy in Capricorn, another cardinal sign. And then we have Cancer and Libra involved in that cardinal cross as well. And the one thing I didn't say much about, I'll just touch on quickly before I go through the signs, is that I did mention Mars in Aries is in this aspect called an inconjunct or quincunx to this new moon, right? And that you may have heard me speak about before at greater length, but it's kind of like this itch we can't scratch. It's like where two energies are not really seeing eye to eye. There's some blind spots there. So watch out for that. It requires adjustments, right? More of that energy of adaptability and willingness to adjust as things go on. So that's the Mars piece. So let's get started. The Virgo new moon through the signs. We're dealing first and foremost in a general forecast like this with rising sign, right? Or ascendant. So if you know your rising sign, listen for that first. And but you can also definitely listen for your sun sign and your moon sign. And when I do these general forecasts, we're talking about whole sign houses. And so, if your chart has been done in a different format, then, which I actually do for personal readings, I look at whole sign, but I mostly use porphyry. But anyway, this may vary slightly for you, but there will be an element of truth either way. Okay, so here we've got, we're going to start with Virgo because Virgo, this is your new moon and it's happening in your sign in the first house, which is about you. It's about the self. It's about the body, the physical body, right? Which you're very much sort of connected to. Physical health, well-being, vitality, appearance even. Very much about your instinctual sort of approach to life and how the world perceives you, how you go about getting your needs met, these kinds of things, right, are first house related. And so this is ultimately when we have a new moon in our sign, in our first house, which would be the case for Virgo rising. It is a complete sort of reset on some level, right? A real opportunity for a new beginning in relation to those first house themes that I just mentioned. So take advantage of this. If you're a Virgo rising, then set aside some time to really set your intentions about what you want, particularly these next 6 months to look like for you and what you want to accomplish, in that time overall. So that's for you, Virgo. Next, we've got Leo, where the new moon is happening in your second house. So this is looking at some kind of fresh start in relation to and setting some new intentions and goals in relation to your finances, your personal resources, right? Money, time, energy, and what you value, what you place importance on, your sense of self-worth. And doing that in a Virgoan fashion, asking yourself, what would Virgo do? How would Virgo tackle this, right? And so we talked about that in the introduction. So definitely listen to that. Next, we've got Cancer. Cancer, the new moon for you is, an opportunity to birth something new in relation to the third house themes of, your immediate environment and, what's going on in your immediate sphere and the communications that you have on the day-to-day and, the people that may be in your immediate environment, meaning your, members of your community, your siblings, your cousins, your neighbors, teammates, peers, this kind of thing, right? Any sort of communication, any kind of learning that goes on, teaching and learning that has to do with more sort of the basics, right? And so, like early learning. So that's the new beginning. Like that's the area of life that the new moon is happening in for you. And so whatever problems you want to solve here, new things you want to tackle, do that in a Virgoan way, which we talked about in the introduction. Okay, next we've got Gemini. So Gemini, for you, this new moon is happening in your 4th house. Home, family, place of living, your roots, your ancestry, connection to oftentimes the female lineage and the mother, but, any sort of more nurturing figures in your life. And so a fresh start on offer here, setting some new intentions in this area and some new goals that you want to see come to pass over the next, in the short term, 2 weeks, and the longer term, 6 months. And doing that with this eye on, the Virgo way of doing it. What would Virgo do in relation to these things, right? How would Virgo tackle this? So that's for you, Gemini. Next, we've got Taurus. For you, Taurus, the new moon's happening in your 5th house. This has to do with your creative projects, creative self-expression, what brings you joy. It can have to do with hobbies, very much about what we create and our sense of pleasure, and also very much about children, right? If that's something that is relevant to you. So your children, other people's children you work with, this kind of thing, right? And so your inner child even. And so for you, Taurus, this, whatever new project, new intention you're setting in relation to these 5th house themes, is you do well. It will turn out best if you approach it in this Virgo fashion that we talked about in the intro. So that's you, Taurus. Next, we've got Aries. Aries, for you, the new moon is happening in your 6th house of your daily routine. This is the home of Virgo. The natural home of Virgo is the 6th house, right? So it's about sort of what you do on the day-to-day, those tasks, and very much about the daily work, whether that be paid or unpaid work, and how you are in service, and your health routines and that kind of thing, which are often impacted by our work, and vice versa, right? So, and it can have to do with pets as well. So for you, Aries, that's where the new intentions, should be set for this new moon. And, think about how Virgo would approach this area of life and whatever new intentions you're setting. And that is the best advice for success, right? Right now in terms of the new moon. So that's for you, Aries. Next, we've got Pisces, where the new moon is happening in your 7th house of your one-to-one close personal relationships. So any close relationship you have, including a marriage partner or significant other, but also close friendships, family, even rivals, that you have, and contracts and agreements is the 7th house as well. And so for you, some fresh start is on offer here, setting some new intentions, something that you want to manifest over the next couple of weeks in the short term, over the next 6 months in the longer term. And ask yourself, what would Virgo do? How would Virgo tackle this? So that's for you, Pisces, Virgo being your opposite sign, right? Next, we've got Aquarius, where this new moon is happening in your 8th house. So this is about some kind of new intentions, fresh start, birthing something new in relation to your entanglement with other people, your intimate connections and relationships, the money and the resources that you share with other people and institutions. Sort of also covering these things that we kind of keep under wraps, right? And we don't necessarily want other people to kind of know about us. So it's this area of vulnerability. It's this deep, psychological kind of healing and issues of healing and wounding are 8th house as well. And so for you, Aquarius, something new on offer here, right? And you have the capacity to start something new, to intend something new, and the best approach is a Virgoan approach, okay? Like we talked about in the intro. So that's for you. Next, we've got Capricorn, where the new moon's happening for you, Capricorn, in your 9th house of higher learning, teaching, learning, of what you learn from foreign people and places, from foreign travel, of your philosophy, your worldview, your belief system. So for you, Capricorn, an opportunity for a fresh start, to set some new intentions here in some way, and to do that in a very Virgoan practical way, which, you're comfortable with, being an earth sign as well. You have some things in common, definitely, with Virgo. So that's for you, Capricorn. Next, we've got Sagittarius, where we've got the new moon happening in your 10th house. So your house of public reputation, your highest aspirations, career, legacy you wish to leave, authority, relationship to authority, this kind of thing. Father figures, the patriarchal figures, that kind of thing. So for you, Sagittarius, this is some kind of new development, a new beginning, something new to manifest in this area of life, and to do that in a practical Virgoan way that we spoke about in the intro. So that's for you, Sag. Next, we've got Scorpio, where we've got the new moon happening in your 11th house, which has to do with the group, the collective, organizations, associations, that sort of thing, friendship groups and networks, and also your hopes and dreams for the future and the people that can help you achieve those, right? And so some fresh start is on offer for you here. And the way to tackle that ultimately is in a very Virgo way, right? So we talked about those details at the beginning of the video, so definitely listen to that. And next we've got, last but not least in this instance, we've got Libra, because the 12th house is where the new moon is happening for you, Libra. And so that is a house of, what goes on behind closed doors, and in the unconscious, and when you're in rest and repose and reflection. And so some sort of fresh start on offer for you here. And, maybe a time to really take a break, and a time to rest and reflect on things right now. And to do that with the energy of Virgo, right? In a maybe very practical way. So listening to the introduction will give you some insight into what I mean when I say in a very Virgoan way. So that's what's going on for all 12 signs. If you have a question for me, then please ask it in the comments below, and I'm happy to answer, because I know I kind of zip through the signs. It's the intro that's really the meat of it, right? So if you have a question, please let me know, and give the video, a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And hopefully I'll see you next week, but it sort of depends on what goes on at the dentist tomorrow. Okay, so take good care. New moon blessings to you, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.